Empowered, the podcast. This is a podcast where we dive into the realities of healthcare and entrepreneurship. We offer our opinion, unfiltered, unapologetic, and always talk with a dose of empowerment. We're here to amplify voices, yours and ours, challenge the status quo, and explore what it truly means to thrive. So let's get into it. So, in the last few episodes, we've been talking about the toxicity in medical culture, from pre med to med school to training. And today, we're going to be talking about the toxicity as an attending because it does not end in training. And in fact, I would say, in a way, it almost gets worse as an attending. What do you think, Shaila?
I agree with you. And because of that, we decided to record this episode with sips of wine to just go through it.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers to changing toxic work environments, especially in medicine.
Sounds good. This is a very important topic, right? And why did I say that it sometimes gets worse? To me personally, I think it's worse because while you're training, at least you're a trainee, they can say you're in the learning phase. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make abuse right, but that's what you can argue. But once you're a full-blown attending, like you put in the work, all the debt that you've gotten yourself into, and you're a good, competent doctor, now you're a good, competent attending, and they're still treating you like that. To me, that's insulting. And to me, that's even worse than being treated like crap in your training. What do you think, Shala?
I agree. You said the word insulting, disrespectful. Whoever goes through medical school and survive it, and whoever goes to residency and survive it, and then fellowship and then survive it, they are professionals. They're not kids to be treated like children. But unfortunately, in a lot of these work environments, we see that professionals, physicians who have gone through all those years are being treated like children, and they're micromanaged. They're put into a lot of stressful situations. There are metrics for measurements, and it just doesn't stop.
Yep. And you go through all your training and you think when you get to an attending, these things will get better because that's what they tell you, right? Oh, once you're an attending, your schedule is going to be so great. You're going to be making so much money. It'll all be worth it. To be determined. I mean, in some ways, life is definitely better than residency training. And in all ways, I'll say it is better because you have a little bit more control over your schedule. But the people that you work with and the people you work around don't always treat you like a well-seasoned doctor who's almost 40 years old, which is how old most of us are by the time we're done with this whole process. And so that is very, very disheartening. It's frustrating. Physicians are treated like we're children, like we need to be micromanaged. We're also treated like we're here to cause trouble. Let's say if we speak up. We're given performance improvement plans. You're taken to HR. If you voice any kind of displeasure or any kind of dissent from the administrators. And overall, I think it's just led to an overall very toxic work environment.
Yeah. And I think we have to clarify it for the audience too, because some people may not even realize it, that they are in a toxic work environment. So that's why we have to clarify what we mean by toxic work environment. It may not be verbally abusive, or very. It may not be exclusively, telling you, "Oh, you're a bad doctor," or something like that. But then the actions point to toxic work environment. And those actions can include unrealistic expectations, lack of leadership support, gaslighting, mistreatment by colleagues and administrators, retaliation for speaking up about patient care, about safety issues, and or supporting a colleague who advocates or even advocating for your colleagues.
Put your head down and work. And that is something that I think has been ingrained throughout our whole training. So once you do become an attending, you're a full-blown, you were already a full-blown doctor during residency training, but at least, they can say you were in the learning process. Now you're a full-blown attending, you're an expert in your field. And there is still lack of respect. There is still discrimination and gaslighting, excessive workloads, and retaliation if you dare say anything.
Yeah, and that's huge. The retaliation part is huge. Most will say, oh, this is not retaliation. We are taking your feedback, but the actions that they take against you, there's no other word for it. These are disciplinary actions taken against people who are talking, who are bringing up leadership flaws, who are advocating for their colleagues and advocating for physicians and advocating for compensation, for example, advocating for patient safety or patient care, or saying they don't want to put their license on the line for unrealistic expectations. I mean, these are all valid concerns, and they should be addressed accordingly.
And it's always leadership. It's always leadership who does not see patients, who are not on the front lines, or they haven't seen patients in many, many years. Tell me why there's like 10 administrators for every physician. That's something I still am trying to make sense of. All of these administrators, I'm not sure what they do, but they definitely, will get on you if you speak with them in any kind of way, if they perceive any kind of tone in how you're speaking with them, if you dare speak up against them. Some will say, administrators are treated even better than physicians in the current healthcare system.
I agree. Because with physicians, again, you're expected to see a lot of patients. Your productivity needs to be high. You're expected to meet certain measures and metrics. And you should not complain, because if you do, then you're not a team player. You're shamed. If you talk about money, you're not compassionate. They just label you. They just put labels on you, or they say, "Oh, you have mental health problem." Then go figure it out.
Anger
Mental
management.
health, when you're just speaking up, when you're just trying to raise concerns and flaws in the system, it's not a mental health issue. Well, it becomes a mental health issue. It becomes frustration when they're gaslighting you, and they just drive you into kind of crazy land, right? But the context is important. What led to those situations where the physicians get frustrated, when the physicians complain? The context is very important, and the context is always kind of ignored. Gaslighting.
You're labeled a troublemaker, like the chronic troublemaker. Well,
Yeah.
I think you've said this before. No problem starts chronically. And at this point in my career, I don't take a lot of pride in being a troublemaker. I'm just trying to do my job and do it well. So when I express concerns that I'm having, why am I a troublemaker? You think I'm a child? It's infuriating.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's why I think it's better to talk about it. And please, I'm asking the audience, share your stories with us, because and we will talk about solutions in the next episode. I think there won't be enough time to talk about solutions in this episode because there's a lot to talk about.
Hmm.
And it's important that we're all on the same page. What measures we can take to address these issues, which are really, really crucial issues, because now this is not residency anymore. It's not just 4 years, it could be your lifetime in this job. So you want to realize, you want to recognize what's going on, and you want to recognize those red flags early on.
Yep. So let's talk about some of the ways that attendingship can also be toxic. And by the way, there's a huge exodus right now of healthcare workers. I think after COVID, everyone got burnt out. The work environment never changed. It continued to stay toxic and even got worse in some ways. So a lot of healthcare workers are now leaving clinical medicine. So what are some of the things that are contributing to this? Well, first of all, there's like the pressure to do it all, right? Like you have to meet your RVUs, you have to meet your metrics, you have to meet your productivity, which means you have to see more and more patients in less and less time. Don't give the good quality care that you're used to giving. I mean, how can you, right? If they're squeezing in that many patients into one day, and all while having increased administrative burden. So you're not only seeing patients, documenting, trying to come up with treatment plans, trying to fight with insurance companies to make sure your patients get the care they need. But now, on top of this, there's all these administrative things that you have to do, recertifications, modules. Like you, every time you start at a new place, you have to get re-credentialed again. You have to submit all your paperwork again. if someone has filed something against you for whatever reason, or administration notices that your productivity isn't high, that's another meeting. It's like endless meetings over and over again. So despite us thinking that we've made it and finally we can have work-life balance, that work-life balance never comes.
Right. Continuing medical education is another one. So you have to keep up with articles, reading articles, going to conferences. So it's not just the work; it's everything that's related to work. And I would argue that we say, okay, now we're working 40 hours a week, but really it doesn't stop, because at nights, if you're not talking about your work at nights, that's good job, but most of us talk about our work at night. Most of us in healthcare and medicine, we are put in situations where it's not out of our minds. We are not disconnected, and we're always talking about our work. Unfortunately, I mean, I want to stop to talk about my work, but sometimes it's impossible. Everything that's on our mind is work that we're doing. So maybe our job is different than other jobs, but because I don't think other jobs are like this, or I see it in my friends who are in corporate jobs, they don't talk about their job the same way as we have it on our mind all the time.
And then when you come home, you're also documenting, depending on what your specialty is. I mean, your husband's a PCP, right? I'm sure there's been times where he's had to come home and have to document. I mean, us too, as neurologists, if you're seeing patients in clinic or even inpatient, there's still documentation that you have to do after your shift is over. Like what you said is absolutely right. You don't observe that in other corporate fields. And if you do observe that in other corporate fields, they're in some way getting compensated for that, and we are not. And that's a big issue, right? Like, what about all of this documentation time, all of this time I'm spending fighting with insurance companies? That's not compensated time. For instance, if you want to talk to your lawyer or make a phone call with your $300, he'll charge you for it. Doctors don't operate in such a way.
Yeah, I made a call with my accountant, maybe an hour call, and I got an invoice for $250. I was shocked. That's more than a lot of physicians' hourly rate. And yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, the years of training don't reflect the amount that we get paid for. And the other thing I want to talk about, yeah, documentation is very important subject. I've heard the phrase that you don't get paid for documentation time. What is that supposed to mean? Why administrators get paid for documentation time? If they're sending emails or scheduling calls, they don't get paid for that? I mean, why is it that only the doctors can hear that phrase that you don't get paid for documentation time?
It's because we're supposed to be altruistic, and this is supposed to be a calling, which is, I think, the biggest crock of SHIT, honestly. I mean, listen, we all came into this because we're altruistic, nice people. But at the end of the day, this is a job. You do work, you get paid for it. And that's the expectation. And I think when they introduce it to us like it's a calling early on, you set the precedence that you'll be going out of your way to do a lot and not getting any compensation in return. So I think you're already set up from the beginning, unfortunately. And it doesn't change, when you're an attending. Academics, private practice, hospital employed roles, I think it's all the same. It's all different flavors of the same problem. I was in academic medicine. Patients are complex. You start your clinic at like 9, you end at 5. That's not always the case. I used to even go in earlier to see some of my patients that were admitted. So my days realistically started around 7. And then, I'd see my patients who were admitted. And then I'd go to clinic. I had to pre-chart. Not all physicians pre-chart. I pre-charted because that made my life a lot easier in visits. So I knew what was going on. So that was, again, uncompensated time. You see your X amount of patients a day. And for me, I noticed every single year, it was more and more I was expected to do in an hour. No lunchtime blocked off. I mean, God forbid you wanted to take even a half hour off just to catch up on charting, because lunch is never really lunch. You're just catching up on charting. And then you finish at 5, but you're not really done at 5 because now you're still documenting. You might need to call a patient back. You might need to talk to a family about a sick patient. You might need to go back to the hospital and talk to some of your admitted patients if something happened to them. So it never really ends. And that is what I dealt with in academics. I know in private practice, it's very similar. People see their patients that are admitted to the hospital and then come to clinic, and then you're just churning out patients because you're expected to see this high volume because guess what? Insurance reimbursements are plummeting. So now you have to see 20 patients to get paid the same as what you were getting paid for maybe 5 patients 10 years ago. So that is also a burnout, or a burnout factory when you're seeing that many patients. And then in hospital employed roles, I think it's also very similar because you're taking care of everyone who's an inpatient, and you don't really get a time to sit down and think about things because you're constantly seeing patients, you're admitting, you're discharging. I would say some hospital employed roles, especially if you're a hospitalist, can be lifestyle friendly, but that really just depends on what you are willing to do and where you're willing to look for these roles.
Yeah, I mean, there is pros and cons to each one, but the overall picture is that okay, you can have a private practice and be off on weekends, but you also have your inbox and your prescription refills and your endless messages that you have to respond to. And then the inpatient side of things, yeah, you're done when you're done, supposedly, if you don't have documentations afterwards, and if you have time to catch up on your documentation during the day. But then the sacrifice is that you have to work weekends and night shifts and holidays, so the overall picture is not as appealing as it is when you are, when you enter um, the medical field or medicine.
Like a nice, clean, like I'm just going to work 9 to 5 and go home and that's it. There's not a 48-hour work week, no matter which one of these avenues you choose, not in academics, because you're going to have to be on call. You're going to have to work weekends. Private practice, like you said, sure, you might be able to take the weekends off, but guess what? Now you still have to deal with your phone calls that came in over the weekend. If you went on vacation, you got to deal with those phone calls, those prescriptions, the prior authorization. So you have to have a really good, competent team, of people who are going to help you with all of this. And then when you deal with hospital employed roles, like you said, it's not, again, not always a 40-hour work week because you're still going to have to work holidays and weekends depending on where you're going. And to be honest, like in areas such as mine, which, New York City is a very heavily populated physician areas, not a lot of hospitalist positions will allow you to just do the regular 9 to 5. There's a lot of overnights, there's a lot of weekends, there's a lot of nocturnist roles more than regular hospitalists. So, there's plus minus to it all, but at the end of the day, you don't have this 40-hour work week and this nice work life balance. Some people are able to achieve it, but I think in the initial phase when you're trying to work hard to sustain your family and also pay off your student loans, it's really hard to maintain that.
I agree. And it's not improving. That's the problem. I think, and that's why it's important to talk about these issues to make a change. Because as we said, the initial years after your training, you don't know, you don't realize it, and you compare it to your residency years, and you say, "Oh, this is great. I'm rich now. I'm getting paid a lot. I'm working less." And you put up with a lot during those first years until few years later, then you realize that, oh, no, I have to change things. I have to set boundaries. And which and I have to focus on work-life balance, because that's when you have your kids, and that's when you have a family, and priorities change. So it's really challenging. That's why you really have to educate our trainees to not accept, to really kind of, and we'll have another episode about this, like contract negotiation and what we have to talk about this, and we have to continue talking about these issues.
Right. So now you have the pressure to do all of this, to kind of do it all. You're not supported by your system. If you're very lucky, you'll end up in a work system or in a work environment where you are supported as a physician, but oftentimes you're not. And there's retaliation for speaking up. There's also legal fears, right? Because if you're seeing such a high volume of patients, you're always worried about malpractice issues. You're also worried about patient complaints, administrator complaints, any repercussions to recredentialing because of that. So all of those things factor into the stress. All of that combined, it really does not get better after residency. It gets better in some ways, but there's still a lot of opportunity for this to be improved, because now, because of all of these things that we just listed, physicians are burning out. They're quitting. They're cutting back. And it really, ultimately, the bottom line for all of this is it worsens patient care.
Yeah, as I said in the last episode, happy physician, happy patient.
There are some physicians who are trying to stay and fight for a change in the system, which, like you said, Shala, I do think it's getting worse. Reimbursements are going down, reimbursements are going down from insurance companies. Consequently, physician reimbursements are going down, which means you have to see more and more patients to keep your practice running or to keep your RVUs up so administrators don't yell at you. Meanwhile, there's more and more administrators now who are getting more and more salaries. The poor physician's salary has been stagnant. Our debt keeps going up, right? It's like very expensive to get to where we are. Apparently, we might not have student loan forgiveness anymore. So, all in all, this isn't heading in the best way. So, a lot of doctors are quitting, they are leaving. There's a few that are staying to fight. And I wouldn't say a few, a lot are choosing to stay and fight, but a lot are also leaving. And who does that ultimately affect? The patient. And I think that's why conversations like this in a podcast such as this are important, because I think patients need to be aware that these kinds of things are happening.
Yeah, and I don't think patients are aware because all they see is that physicians are not responding to them. Physicians are not spending time with them, enough time with them, going through their results and things like that, because the root cause of the problem is not talked about. And that's why I hope that we'll have some patient audience in our podcast to listen to this and realize that the root cause of the problem is more than that, is more than just the physician not wanting to spend more time with the patients. Actually, if this whole kind of documentation burden and an RVUs and the pay gap and all this is not there, that's why we came to medicine. That's why we want to take care of patients. I want to spend time with a patient, talking to them, and talk about even just outside of their medical problems. Know about them. I want to be connected to them even on a personal level. Why not? But and that's the fun part of the medicine, is to be able to connect with your patients on a personal level. That how many kids this one have, how many, what the other one is going through, but nowadays that's impossible. It's impossible. So that's why I think the fun part of medicine is not there anymore. The altruistic part of medicine is not there anymore. It's just kind of robotic mechanic work.
Like you said, the best part of medicine, what to me gives me like the dopamine hit, makes me feel happy about what I do, is sitting down, talking to patients, making time to get to know who they are. I think that is now getting lost, unfortunately. And so if you no longer have that, a lot of physicians don't really see the point in just sitting and doing robotic work. Like if that's what I wanted to do, I could do any 9 to 5 desk job.
Some of us also feel that, okay, hopefully I have like a straightforward patient who doesn't talk too much, because if they do, then I'm behind, then that puts me behind and I'm more stressed out during the day. So it's really, really frustrating where we're headed.
Absolutely. And I agree. It is very stressful where we're headed. There are a few solutions on how we can work to fix this. And we will be talking about that in our next episode. So anything else you want to add to this episode, Shala? Anything you think is important? Any stories you want to share? I definitely think the listeners should send in stories, as you said earlier.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I would share is that I feel that this kind of toxic work environment is worse when fellows or residents continue in working in their programs. I feel that the attendings never see their trainees as equal, even when they become attendings. So we can talk about this in more details in the next episode, where we talk about solutions. But I think that's very important to explore also, because that has been my observation.
It's true. It's almost like you never grow up. It's
Yeah,
like you're always the little child.
exactly. Yeah.
Our next episode, and well, it won't be our last one on toxic medical culture. I'm sure we'll talk about more in the future. But our next episode, we'll wrap it up with solutions.
So stay tuned. Thanks for tuning to Be Empowered, the podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and rate this podcast. Share it with someone who needs it. Stay strong, stay empowered, and we'll see you next time.